part 5 of SpriteKit Invaders. In part 5, what we're going to do is create two functions that will end and start the game, which are long overdue. So what we're going to do now is go to did move to view, and this block of code here where I'm going to start with is going to become the basis of our new wave function, and then we'll supplement this with a game over function. So let's get started. To begin with, I'll select the lines in did move to view, and I will cut these so that I can move them into a function of their own. This function will be the basis for our start new wave, which is the best name I can think of for this function, so we'll call it that, start new wave. Then we'll go ahead and define that function, and we'll use this repeatedly whenever it's time to start a new round of this game. So what we're doing in part 5 is we're ending the game, and we're starting a new game if needed. So with that in mind, what would end the game? Well, as you know, the aliens reverse when they hit the side of the game field. So what I think I'm going to do in order to speed this up, make this a little harder for the player, is I'm going to increase the alien speed whenever they touch the sides of the game field, which is exactly what Space Invaders does. So as the aliens touch the sides and time goes on, as the game progresses, the aliens will get faster and faster. I'm going to set a maximum limit for their speed, otherwise it'll get ridiculous. So the top speed will be 1024 pixels, or world units in SpriteKit's parlance. And then in addition to this, I'm going to lower the position of the aliens. So I'll have a for loop here. I'll iterate through all aliens that are on the screen, and I'm going to lower them one rank. In other words, they're going to get closer to the player. And we'll get it set up so that as they get closer to the player, they'll become more dangerous. Their shots will arrive from closer in. Let's see how we did. So I'll just speed through this here. They're getting lower. They're getting faster, 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 lower. And then some weird stuff happened. We should have ended the game before that happened. So let's go ahead and make some more adjustments. We're looking through our code because we want to end the game where it's appropriate to do so. And at this point, we're going to set a flag if the aliens touch the player and say that the game is over. So I'm going to copy the block of code where the player touches a bullet, and I'm going to change it so that I'm looking for an alien touching the player. I will then declare that this is a game-ending condition, and it's probably time to create a flag at the top of my variables list that says whether the game is over or not. Game over flag equals false. And when an alien touches the player, it's going to be true. Whenever we start a new wave, we'll make sure that that's false again. So here we go. Explode player, game over flag equals true. Game over flag equals true if the player hits an alien or an alien hits the player. Now, in update, what we're going to want to do is if the game is over, the aliens need to stop moving. So I'm going to check if that's the case, and if it is, I'm going to cease all alien movement by setting their vectors to 0, 0. Put a little comment to myself as to why I'm doing that. Okay, what else do we need to change here? We should not be shooting any bullets if the game is now over. So any aliens that are on the screen will check during their shot process if the game is over, and if it is over, they're not going to shoot. We've got to capture that variable, self.GameOverFlag. Okay. Next thing we want to do is the player, after it explodes, should not reappear if the game is over. The player should stay gone permanently. So where I've got the player reappearing during explode player, I'm going to do another check for whether the game is over or not. Equal equals true. And that's actually wrong. That should be false. There we go. Let's give it a test. So the aliens do lower. I can shoot them, and when they touch the player, they do explode them. So the player's now dead. There's a lot of strange effects that can happen, which I can demonstrate here. When you manually move the alien position with SpriteKit, the physics engine doesn't like that one bit. So if you just change their position, the physics engine will have a cow about it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to slightly change how I'm reversing their direction. Instead of letting it just set a flag, I'm also going to force them slightly over to the left or to the right so that they're away from the game border. That way they don't get hung up on it. And because I've manually changed the position, the physics engine will have a heck of a time working out exactly where they need to be. So I'm going to separate them from the edge, just a hair, about 8 pixels. And then that'll give it just enough margin so that the simulation can continue and there's no glitches there. So that's important. We want to stop those kind of glitches from happening. So I'm going to change the order of operations for what I'm doing. I'll reset the flag at the very end after I've moved all aliens to the left or right. Now let me show you what happens if you don't kill the aliens or they don't touch you. So if they don't touch you, just sort of you don't shoot enough of them to erase them, this will happen. So that's weird. We should have ended the game long before that. So let's also put in a provision for if the alien gets lower than the player, the game should end. So it's time to call end the game if any one of these aliens got lower than the player. So we'll set the game over flag to true. And we'll just confirm that there's no more glitches visually. So I've got a good example here where there's plenty left. Game ends. Or does it? Oh, that's weird. We got to fix that now. So why did that happen? We set game over flag second. We should have set it first. And now you're probably noticing I'm changing this in a lot of places. And this is a very obvious code smell. So we're going to fix this in a moment. But first, let's make a game over screen and let's make a new wave screen. So we'll get back into Piscal. And just bear with me here. I'm going to create some graphics. I'm going to fatten the pen up a little bit. And I like to do my graphics by hand like this. I don't care for having, an artist like for doing it for money on Fiverr or anything. I can do good enough for my demos. And it's more fun this way. So I'll export. What am I doing? I'm going to export just this frame. So we'll save that. I'll rename this one to Game Over. And then I'll make a new frame. Stop that animation. And then I'll draw a start message, like new wave. So I'll just put start. Make my little exclamation point. Perfect. We'll export this. This one will be also a PNG for just this frame. And I'll name that one start. And as you can imagine, we're going to put that into the assets. So we'll drag those in. Done. Now it's time to put them into position. So we're going to create a function to display that. And so it's time to get rid of this code. This code does not belong here. We're going to cut that out. We're going to make a function called end the game. And end the game is where we're going to do all of this, any animations that we're doing, any score, any resets, etc. It's long overdue. It's time. So here's end the game. We'll define it. We'll start with pasting that code in, and then we're going to grab that graphic that we made. We're going to put it on the screen as soon as the game is ended. So we're going to make a sprite from the game over image. I'm going to set it to filtering mode nearest so that it's kind of pixely. And then I'm going to put it in the center of my game border. That's 304 by 240. Then I'm going to scale it up just a bit so that it's bigger, more blocky, more video gamey looking. And then what I want this to do now is I want this to pulse or blink a little bit. So I'm going to create a series of actions that create that effect. So I'm going to have a weight action, then a size down action. The size down action is just to shrink the size of my sprite a little bit. Help if I spelled this right. There we go. And then a size up action. And that's going to do the opposite. It's going to increase the size of my sprite, and the duration is about a half second. Now I'm going to create a sequence, and a sequence is an array of actions, and the sequence will be size down, wait, size up, wait, and then we're going to repeat that sequence. So my blinking animation will be a repetition of that sequence, and I guess we'll do 6 times. Then we're going to run it. And after we're done running it, we're going to remove it from the game screen. And then we're going to start a new game. The game is just going to start from 0 again. Then, under Start New Wave, we're going to do something similar. So that start image that I made, we're going to pull that in. So we'll make a sprite node out of that. I'll grab the start image there. We'll do very similarly that we did with the game over sprite. We'll set the filtering mode. We'll set the position to the center, which is 304/240 for our particular game border. Then we'll scale it up a little bit so that it is bigger and blockier looking. And brain fart, I just forgot. I never actually added game over sprite to the border, and we should do that now. That just popped into my head. Okay, so we're going to do the actions again for start sprite. So for start sprite, I want it to blink in and blink out. So I want it to wait about a quarter second, display, hide, quarter second, etc. I'll make an invis action, make this invisible, and I'll just hard set alpha to 0. And then I'll make a visible action, viz, and I will hard set alpha in this one to 1.0. Okay, now that I've got that, we're going to make a sequence again. This time the sequence will be the array showing invisible, wait, visible, wait. Then our blinking action is going to be this repeated, and we'll say 4 times, and then we're going to run that. So run blinking, and at completion of that run, we'll just remove the start sprite. This time I'm going to remember to add it in to start to the game border. And I think we got everything good here. So there's a little bit more work we need to do when we start a new wave. This new wave may be in sequence on a previous wave, which means there may be aliens in the screen. So we're going to do a for loop, get rid of any aliens. Player might have been dead. So we're going to make the player alive again, set up his physics, and then the aliens may have crashed into him at a high speed. We're going to reset the speed back to the default speed of 64. I'm going to put some notes to myself explaining why I'm doing these steps, why I'm setting it up so that I know when I'm resetting the scene. And oh, that looks great. There we go. So we got this looking good. Boom, game over. Player exploded. We're going to wait for that animation to finish. And then we're going to confirm new game started. Hey, that's great. We did real good there. So what didn't we do? Well, what didn't we do is there's no extra lives. There's no list of like, do we have 2 men remaining, 2 spaceships remaining? I'm going to go back to Piscal. I'm going to draw that. So you can watch me here. I'm going to speed this up so you have to sit through it. I'm doing it as fast as I can, but even then it's a lot to slog through. I'm making one texture with 3 ships in it. Then I'm duplicating that texture, deleting a ship, duplicate it again, delete a ship. And then I've got, there it is, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to download a zip file with them. I got them as 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to drag those into my assets. And now I have little ship sprites that I can use to represent the extra lives. Just call that lives, make a little folder. There we go, L1, 2, 3. Back to gameplay C. At the top, I'm going to make a sprite to represent this thing. This will be the live sprite, and I'll start it off with the L3. So it'll start with 3 lives as soon as the application is launched. And then I'm going to make a list of textures here. And the purpose of the textures is going to be to change whether or not, we're showing 2 extra ships, 1 extra ship, 3 extra ships, etc. So I'm going to go here to did move to view where we're setting up for the very first time, and I'm going to configure the live sprite. I'm going to set the position. This is something I chose so that it would be below the game border. This will be off to the left-hand side. So I'll add it as a child of my main scene. Then I'm going to start to set this thing up. I'm going to scale it a little bit because I like it to be gamey looking, blocky. And then I'm going to load my textures. So we'll begin with Lives Textures Array. We're going to append an SK texture. First one I'm going to grab is Alien 11. That's a null texture. There's no pixels in that. That'll be array element 0. So then after that, I'm going to grab texture 1, texture 2, texture 3. They will match the number of lives the player has left. I'll just pull them out of the array by index. There we go. And then again, because that's a little bit weird, I'm going to make a note to myself. This is a blank texture. It takes position 0. Index 1, index 2, index 3. That way I don't forget why I did that. Now, how do I update that when the player takes damage? I'll make a function called update lives. And in this, I will check how many lives the player has, which we should define. So we will. Here's lives. It equals 3. Piece of cake. Now let's define update lives. So what we're going to do here is we're going to check if lives are equal to or less than 0. And if so, we're going to return a null texture. There will be no ships showing. And I guess we'll exit this function early. And then if this is not the case, I always get that wrong. I was always backwards. So if it's not the case that we're at 0, we still have some lives remaining, it's time to pick the appropriate texture to show. So we'll pull that out of the array based upon the number of lives remaining. Lives, S, plural. We don't need to return early. It doesn't even make sense. Okay, here we go. So then I'll also set this to nearest filtering mode so that it's blocky still. And then we just need to call update lives in the right spot. So the right spot to do this is in explode player. We'll call update lives, and then we will, not player.lives, it's lives minus 1. So we'll subtract 1 life every time the player explodes. And it would help if I put a space up there. There we go. And then we'll update the lives remaining. And then, let's see here. We will end the game if the player is out of lives. And then in end game, we don't want to call explode player again if the game ended because the player exploded. So we'll make sure to only explode the player if it has any extra lives remaining. Okay. Now, when we're about to end, when we've done a game over screen and we're about to start again, we're going to do a new game. We'll pop in 3 lives again to start the game off. Okay, so what else would end the game? What else would end the game is if there are no enemies left. If there are no enemies, we need to start a new round. So that's important. So what we're going to do is in update, let's look here down at the bottom, and let's add a check for there being no aliens left in the scene. So if we've killed them all, let's start a new wave. That makes sense. His empty is not a function. It's some Boolean. All right. So let's run through. I'm going to launch my game. I'm going to kill all the aliens. And we did great. Now we got new game being called properly. And I'll just speed it up. We did it. Game's now over. So we've reached the end of part 5. You guys have done great. The game is ending just like we wanted to. That's been a long time. That's been a long 15 minutes. I'd say I pushed my luck. So why don't we end it here? Part 6 will be sound effects, and that'll be the final part. We can end it there. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.